Oh, good morning, everyone. See, how do I switch from that to that, right? Hey, good morning, everyone.
Lights, camera, action.
It is, it's the same. I look the same. I don't change any different than before the recording. But again, just thank you again and appreciate the time taken from last week off. There's been some conversations that Anne has been having with many of you, and appreciate you again for taking time out of your days because I think it's valuable. Sometimes our Hollywood Square Zoom thing just doesn't allow for that conversation to happen a little bit on a more personal basis. So I've made, I can make John Fay, who's going to do the
John and I are going to tag team it, but John's got the slides. John was out sick yesterday, so talk about a deadline. We were like, working on this morning.
Give me one more second, because every time when someone moves around and talks, let me make John the co-host. And I just want,
who do we have on the calls?
I'm going to just go. I'm going to go right through this, Anne. So if we can just wait 1 second, because I know that. So we have Kevin Brower from Harbor One. We have Ted Carmen. We have John Fay from City Planning's office. Hugo from Harbor One. Cindy Pendergrass from NeighborWorks. I know, and you have your gala tonight. So good luck with that. We have Amanda from Mass Development. Joffrey Anatoli. Kadi from Brockton Redevelopment Authority, Kelly from Brockton Redevelopment Authority. These two ladies I'm spending a lot of quality time with, which is all great news. Vanessa from, Vanessa, tell me, I know it's Greens. If you can unmute yourself, Vanessa, and just
it's Legal Greens.
Legal Greens, thank you. I drive by it every day, so I know. So, and I think you recently just received some sort of award. Am I right, Vanessa?
I was in the Haitian Association.
Yes.
I was in the
Yeah, I saw that. So congratulations on being recognized for your work.
Thank you.
Jonathan from Trinity, and who I don't know who is on the 17. Who is it? Oh, sorry.
You're on the phone.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. And Chris Cooney just joined us. So we've got a full house. This is being recorded for note taking, and I now will turn this over to Anne.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you. I haven't. Oops, John, you're going to throw this up there. John Fay and I have had the chance to digest some of the information from the last couple of working committee meetings, as well as some individual conversations I've been able to have. And thank you for those. I haven't connected with everybody I wanted to connect with, but I did connect with a few. And we got some additional information and ideas that we wanted to share. This hasn't gone back to the working committee yet. So we will probably need to drill down a little bit further into this, but to give you some background, at the last committee meeting, we talked about the idea of 4 or 5 different scenarios related to a potential fee structure that we felt were generally fair and equitable, and getting us to the baseline of revenue that we wanted to try to generate in order to support the budget that we have also presented to you. After that meeting, or at that meeting, there was a lot of discussion about does this idea of a flat rate work? Should we be thinking about some other things? And honestly, I think there was a misunderstanding, John and I took away, and some of us, others of us, that the idea of having a flat rate across the board, and looking at it a little further and talking to people, Jeffrey and others, that's not really what people were thinking about or intended. So we went kind of back to some earlier versions that we really didn't go down the road too far with, and we think we have 2 scenarios that we were presenting. One of and both of them kind of go back to the concept of classification of use. So looking at different types of properties in slightly different ways. This is a pretty common way of many of the bids are approaching their fee structures, so that there's a differential between what might be a residential rate and a commercial rate, and the nonprofits maybe come in at a different kind of a scenario as well. Taking into consideration, so this is kind of a hybrid. It sort of scales up, it scales back by the rate. So we ran it in one way by a rate, and in another way by classification of use, and another way with a flat fee structure for residential, and then other properties in at a rate. So you'll see we've got three slides we're going to present. So we're not talking about 47 different fee structures. We're talking about 2 versions that are, I think, reflect some of the comments that have been made about a potential cap or getting close to a cap of a certain amount of money. How do we deal with residential and that is fair? And then how do we deal with some of the other types of properties, including, and they're not called out separately, but there are other publicly owned properties that are in this district. And so we've had some conversations with BAT and with and how to approach the Commonwealth and the federal government, and how they typically are involved that are not in this calculation, but would be in the ultimate fee structure. So we've had some very productive conversations with, is Matt on this call? I thought I saw him. Michael on this call?
No.
Okay, so Michael and I met and talked about how the Transit Authority might enter into an agreement that would include some things that are both cash and in kind, and they are working out, what they might be able to bring to the table that would fit into this fee structure in that sort of a negotiated agreement way. And I think we had a very productive conversation along those lines. So with that, I'm going to let John pull up a few of these slides, and we're going to walk you through kind of our thinking and to try to get some feedback on these ideas. So John, do you want to? I'm going to let you kind of walk through your two slides, and then I can fill in, sort of how we got to this point.
Absolutely. So we used a lot of what conversations that Ann had with stakeholders and residents, and we've kind of narrowed down the fee structure a bit. So again, as in previous versions, the first $1 million is going to be assessed at the same rate, whether or not you have $1 million in value. That first bucket of value will be all assessed at the same rate, and then incrementally it will graduate down based on how much value is left over. So each successive bucket will have a lower rate, and then those will be added up, and that will be your final rate. So anything over $6 million has a very low rate, and anything from 0 to 1 has a higher rate, but won't break the bank. In both of these scenarios, again, as usual, residential properties under 4 units will be excluded. So will condos. Nonprofits are included in this structure. And then what this will yield is about $720,000. Excuse me. Do you have anything to add, Ann, for red scenario?
No, this is a straight across the board rate.
Right. The only uses that are pulled out are the residentials that are excluded, the condos, the publicly owned, whether it be city or otherwise.
And they would be dealt with in a different way.
Correct. Whatever responsible agency is that owns that property will be the one to be dealt with. Yeah, so this is one structure that we had. This is a red scenario. In the next one, it's very similar. All the fee percentages are exactly the same. The only difference being residential units. We took.
John, can I
Yes.
interrupt for 1 second? Amanda was asking if the view can be changed to one slide. You
Is
have
it?
your notes.
Is it not?
Your notes are on the side.
Oh, geez. Sorry, it's
No, that's
showing
just
the
the
wrong
next-
screen.
That's
That's-
okay. And if you don't mind, before we get to the next one, if you can just go back, just so it's a bigger view, and this will be shared just between lots of different scenarios that happened yesterday. John wasn't feeling well and things were busy, but we'll get this PowerPoint to you so you can view it in a much closer view.
Yes. Am I
Thank-
showing the correct screen now?
You
Yes.
are. That's
Okay.
perfect.
All
Thank you.
right. I
Thank you,
apologize for
Amanda.
that.
Thank you, Amanda.
I did not realize. So this is a bit larger so we can all see. But yeah, that was the red. So we, on the second one, we incorporated some of the suggestions that we had capping residential units for $100 per unit per year for whatever that residential property contains. But the structure itself is identical as the last one. So it has a slightly lower yield of 618,000. It still is within the ballpark of what we're looking for. And again, residential properties under 4, condos are excluded, nonprofits are in, and then publicly owned properties will be dealt with on a basis of whatever the responsible party is. So this one, again, it does have a slightly lower yield, but it does concede the suggestions that were given to us. And then we have some example properties here, and then some considerations that this fee structure provides. It does give the opportunity for large nonprofits who have the ability to give cash or in-kind services to do so if they wish. And then the $20,000 cap that was bandied about a little bit, it would under both of these, under both of these scenarios, that $20,000 cap would only affect one property. So I was trying to hit all the points that we were hoping to hit under 20K, 100 per unit per year if we wanted to do that, but still hit that point about $500,000, maybe a little bit more, so that we could do what we are hoping to do. So in the bottom here, I just pulled out three properties. The first one, 071, that is the average of properties under $1 million is about $238,000. So I took the property closest to that value just so we could see what that average user would pay. It's just slightly under $1,000, and that is a commercial property. The next one is literally the most valuable property in the district. And they are the only affected property that would be over 20,000. They are a nonprofit, so they would have the ability to have cash and in-kind mixture if they so wish, or if we so wish to allow that. And then this last one is a higher valued property, because I know that those were, we don't have many high value properties, but those that are represented were concerned about the fee being excessive. So I just pulled that one out to show what that particular unit would pay.
And the other, just to add to that a little bit, we have precedents in other communities with other bids for places like hospitals or large nonprofit users or other large users. It could be a large commercial property user that they have entered into agreements of both cash and in-kind, that the in-kind things that they're able to contribute, the in-kind that they're able to contribute add up to roughly what they would pay if they were paying entirely by cash, but it is more doable for those kinds of properties. So there's precedent for doing that. Lots of places do it. In Newmarket, they did it with their hospital that was located in their district, and I can show you some other examples as well. The other piece of this is that as we looked at doing a differential by use with the fee calculations, it works out about roughly the same if we break it out in that way. This way, the lion's share of we have 84% of our properties have a certain value. And this way we keep that number for those smaller ones, at a comparable rate that is relative to their value, but they're participating and we think that it's fair. And then at the higher end, we're not going over a certain aggregate amount for any one property, except for one property is slightly over that $20,000. And then we're trying to deal with the differential for residential properties, which is common by looking at a per unit calculation. So that's kind of the package of where we are right now. And we'd love your feedback and response to to this. Again, if it's something we've got to test drive a little bit further and think about a little bit further, but we kind of tested, John and I looked at a number of different properties, kind of tested it out, added up some of those properties, that people who owned multiple properties, to see what their bottom line looked like. And I think we've kind of gotten within the parameters of what we've been talking about. And
So let's hear from some of those who have,
so maybe we could take this down so we can see everybody.
Yep, sorry.
Ted or Joffrey or Jonathan, Chris, Joe, anyone? Vanessa, I'm just looking, the thoughts.
I mean, it's kind of difficult to give feedback right on the spot, but I guess it does
True.
reflect some of the some of the feedback received. So maybe, again, I'd have to look at it, kind of separately and independently. Again, I can't give give feedback directly on the spot without kind of diving deeper
Yeah, no,
into it.
I understand. And I apologize for not getting this to you ahead of time. But
That was me. Apologize.
That's it. Again, the idea is that this is done methodically and with care and not be rushed through. And so while it would have been great to have it be sent out, it's here, and John will send that to me, and I'll get that out to with the recording from today to those that have been involved with the discussions.
Yeah, so this is Jonathan. First, I want to thank John and Ann for continuing to put these various scenarios and coming back each week, giving a lot of thought in between these meetings. I do think we all appreciate the effort you're all putting in towards trying to figure out a way to make this bid work. So thank you for that. And I think conceptually, if just as a philosophy, the approach with the graduated fee structure makes sense. But in practical standpoint, and again, obviously my responses are tempered by our block, right? I can think about other people's properties as well, but realistically, there's a little bit of a greater impact to our city block in this process than most properties. If anyone didn't already figure out, the example of the 100+ units was our phase 1 building, which I forgot what the number was, but it was 12 or 14,000.
That is actually not your building. I apologize.
It's not. Wow.
Nope, it is not.
So
I purposely chose not your building.
okay. I'm surprised there's another 100+ unit apartment building downtown, but that's good. So, but we are that number probably ×2 plus a commercial building. So, we're looking at a big number. And one of the things that keeps coming up, and again, I'm not picking on nonprofits in any way. I'm not picking on government-owned buildings in any way. But the notion of the in-kind services as an alternate for making a cash payment, I don't know that I've seen or heard or understand that those in-kind services reduce the budget. So in other words, this fee structure that was presented raises $760,000 towards an operating budget. And then that pays for the services that are proposed. But I don't have a sense that if all of the nonprofits agree to participate with in-kind services, that actually reduces the operating budget from 760 down to something lower, and therefore the assessed percentages on all of the for-profit get reduced to meet that difference. And so we're still talking a pretty big number, a number that honestly, I don't think we can necessarily support for our block, given, the total dollar amount that we'd be looking at. Because I have to believe that we're somewhere near that building that was used as an example. And you know, and again, others in this meeting are gonna start approaching these numbers of units very quickly and, you know, have a similar impact. So can you speak to how the in-kind of the city and in-kind, or not even just the city, there's also state government, in-kind for the government and nonprofit will reduce that operating budget so that maybe we're talking about less dollars once it's figured out with them?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of examples. You know, if you look at the program of work that we're proposing that we accomplished within this budget, some of this have to do with some clean and safe initiatives and other kinds of things. And I'll give you in a couple of examples in other places, or the hospital in Newmarket is bringing to the table both cash and also some other sort of related services that support their clean and safe effort that they're able to put into the mix that reduces that amount that has to be contracted out, and that they're able to provide those kinds of services. So it's a little something that we would have to talk about individually, you know, with and it usually is for the very large types of entities that might be within your district, like a hospital facility or something like that. That may technically be a nonprofit, but there may be some combination of things that works best for them. And they're a real outlier in this conversation here. For the most part, most are nowhere near that, and they're in that value, and most are much smaller. In terms of the municipality and the other publicly owned properties, like, for example, I'm sorry, Michael's not on this call. Some of the things that we were discussing were with the Transit Authority were additional barrels and ways that they are dealing with their public space in terms of maintenance, snow removal, barrels, and things that could remove that from the equation for maintenance, but something that they might be able to do in addition to cash. With the federal government, which would be the post office, the way the federal government participates in bids across the country is for contracted services. So let's say in the way that we've done it, because I've done it in other locations, is that you figure out what are those services that are being provided to that federally owned property and give a value to them, and then you enter into a contract. And they do this through the Good Neighbor policy, and they do this across the country. Takes some time to work it out, but that's kind of how you approach a federally owned property. To be quite honest with you, dealing with the state, it's been a challenge. I mean, there's precedent with DOT, DCR, Health and Human Services for their secretariats to enter into agreements, both cash and mostly cash, for certain kinds of services. Like with DCR, we're just working with one now that they are planting trees and doing stuff that we wanted to do, or maintenance kinds of or access to certain spaces that they are making available to, that are consistent with the plan. So yeah, they're kind of all one individual conversations to try to figure out how does that help reduce the budget, or offset some of the costs of the budget that you're trying to do in that community, as well as bringing in. And those public things are not in this calculation for what we're trying to, that they are in the description of the fee structure, but they're not in the value calculation that John has put out to you right now. One of the things, Jonathan, we did try to look at all of these scenarios and add up your properties in aggregate, and I don't think they go over that upper limit that we were trying to not go over.
Yeah, I mean, well, keep in mind, I put that number out as
right.
On the fly, and it wasn't a number we were trying to get to. It was if it's above that, I'm pretty sure we're a definite no. So I don't think that's the number we should be gearing towards, because again, it's a big operating cost. And you know, I think Joffrey made the comment last time that if we look at that dollar amount in the aggregate, that's an entire employee for the entire year that we could pay somebody to make our block the most beautiful block in the city and, you know, use that to benefit ourselves. I'm not saying that's what we're going to do, but we have to look at the outlay to this overall district in the context of, you know, that's money that's not going towards the property. So I do think, you know, it would be helpful. And again, I don't know if we get locked into this fee structure when the bid's put in place and then the conversations happen with the other than profit property owners to figure out if it can offset. But I do think it's important for us that all of those other than profit services, monies, all that reduce the total, which reduces our fee rather than adding more stuff, because until we see an economic benefit for the bid, i.e. if our occupancy goes up and our rents go up and we're making more revenue because the downtown is better, we really need to keep this at a smaller scale that's, you know, economically manageable. So again, you know, if we're locked in at front and those come in and then it just adds to the total, that doesn't look as good to us as, you
Yeah,
know,
well,
once we figure out them, then our 700 goes to 500, which means and plus the grants come in and then it goes to 400 and then our percentages go down to X, Y, Z, et cetera. And our outlay is much less. That's a structure that works better for us.
so I think, Jonathan, we weren't able to connect before this meeting, but I would like to have that individual conversation. And so we were going from a little bit from what you had mentioned at the last meeting in terms of trying to set, you know, we thought as an aggregate upper limit might be. And so we're working with that limited amount of information. So I would like to follow up with an individual conversation with you if I could. The other scenario would be to look at that differential per unit per year for residential, which is quite common. And they do that a lot with hotels. We do that see that with residential apartment buildings, and making the argument that $100 per unit per year is a number that we have discussed. And we put that in, and that's really how the second scenario is derived. I'm not sure we're going to have every single solitary agreement completely pinned down, you know, before you guys make a decision to go forward or not with this scenario. But I think we need at least to have a conceptual consensus around a game plan that seems to be viable, and then we work, you know, towards that end.
Right. But I guess what I'm trying to get to is, let's say we elect to implement the bid and it gets legally structured and all. Are we, sorry, John, I just saw your comment, and assessed value and revenue are not necessarily directly correlated. So I can tell you, like our enterprise building, you can assess it at whatever you want, but unless we're going to sell it, the value is not necessarily what the cash flow is. So we have to consider cash flow, which in the case of an enterprise building is negative. So now we're adding more negative cash flow. So again, I understand that this is a graduated scale, and I recognize and appreciate that, but it is not a proportional scale. There are very different cash impacts to different size uses. And going back to what I was saying, though, is I guess, Ann, the very simple question I'm trying to understand is, if we implement the bid,
yep,
and then you're able to have the conversations with the other than profit owners, are we able to reduce the percentages on the for-profit, or are those then locked? And so that other stuff comes in and it's just extra money coming into the bid, or extra services coming into the bid?
you can, once you've established the fee structure, that's the fee structure unless your bid decides to change it. And you would change it by a vote, a petition to all of the property owners within the district. I would say that right now, we have kind of really worked hard on this budget, and it's kind of a must-have budget right now in terms of how we were looking at the services that you hope to provide. So, we are trying to construct a pretty realistic yet conservative budget that delivers the base of services that you've said are your must-haves. I would argue that most bids have found that once they get started, they find that they perhaps want or need to do additional kinds of things and look at you. So you're looking for additional ways to support that and grants and other kinds of opportunities, but you also might find things that you feel that you really want to add to the services that you're trying to do, or that things that are important to add a return on your investment in this district. But right now we've got a budget that is constructed around kind of what you have indicated as a group as your must-haves, based on pretty real numbers that we've gotten from other bids and other vendors, potential vendors who have looked at this project and said, this is what it's going to take. I feel confident that those are realistic numbers that gives you that baseline.
Yeah.
It's up to you. I mean, if you come back and say this is not a tenable, kind of a fee structure, and we need to look at again, then you make choices about what services you want to not do.
Sorry, Ann, I'm sorry. I just don't think you're catching my point here. I'm not questioning the expense side. I understand that the budget is the cost that would be the minimum necessary to make the bid effective. What I'm saying is, of that total expense line, if the other than profits contribute services and dollars of X and Y, is it reducing the for-profits contribution towards that total expense number? What it sounds like, I think, is we're going to have the for-profits pay that expense number, and then the other than profits will add services and cash after the fact, which will add more expense options, but not offsetting what the for-profits pay. And what I think, just to cut to the bottom line here, is I think we need to know prior to locking in a fee structure that then has to go before a vote. In my opinion, we need to know what the other than profits are going to contribute in their negotiated agreements to this total expense budget of 760, and then adjust the for-profit fee percentages to make up the difference after that. Now, I realize you can't do that for every single small property owner, but as was just noted, the largest, most valuable property in the downtown is one of these that will negotiate most likely an other than cash structure. And we need to know how that's going to reduce that 760 expense.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's fair to say, to take a look at this, I think that we really only have a handful of larger nonprofit organizations, that property owners that play into this equation. The very small ones, I think, are going to be so nominal in terms of what that is. That means I think there are probably, what, John, 3 or 4 that are on the larger end of the nonprofit world that we should have conversations with, and we haven't yet. So yeah, I think that's a good point, and we can certainly continue those individual conversations. We are the top line of your budget, does have a projected amount for what we hope to achieve with the municipality, and but it doesn't reflect a couple of the other publicly owned properties, namely the post office and the Commonwealth buildings and BAT. I think those are the only, and the BR. Those are the only other ones that are not under the city's domain, I think. So yeah, there are still a few of those kinds of conversations. I think they will have an impact on the budget. I'm not sure they're going to have that great great of an impact on the budget overall, but it is certainly something that would, factor into this. And I'd like to have an individual conversation with you further about, about your properties. I think the other scenario is the scenario that John put up there that talks about looking at residential units as a flat $100 a unit a year rate, which has an impact on the yield, which brings it down to a little over 600. But I think that addresses that, and a lot of places, a lot of bids do that across the Commonwealth, that has that differential rate for residential units. And I think that was a number that we have discussed that might be doable. And if and we did add up what that means for everybody who has residential units in this district, and would like to argue that it is an investment, but it does equate to less than $10 a month per unit per year. And it is an investment, I'll grant you, but it is it's something that that I think takes into account the different types of use, being residential versus commercial, and yet is a number, is a value that we've had some feedback on that seems reasonable. So that second slide that we put up there looked at that scenario.
About other comments? So John put the document in the chat. It will also be emailed to you. And I think this is where Joffrey started off, is that to really kind of delve into it. And while the conversation's been very healthy, take another look at it. And I think the idea is really to take a look. And if you can put your contact again in the chat, your email and your cell phone number.
Sure.
I think that could be helpful. In hearing again from the conversations that those who, again, the perspective from the property owner and what it means and the impact, I think there's great value in hearing that as well. So the strategy would be, we're sitting on, do we want to meet next week with others? Do you want to give it another week? We're getting into a little bit of some silly season where lots of things are going on, and including the chambers having their annual meeting next Wednesday, and lots of different things are happening. So
what I would propose doing is taking those of you who are on the working committee, or if anybody else who wants to join in on that, that we concentrate on these two versions of the proposed conceptual fee structure, and look at your own properties and look at properties across the board. Because yes, in some ways, I know this is an investment for every property owner, but we also are trying to look at this. How do we create a fee structure that's fair and equitable, fair and possible for all kinds of properties? And we have things that have values of little as $700 to people who have values of $15, $18 million. So we're trying to come up with a fee structure that yes, is an investment, and I know it needs to have a return on your investment. So I'm asking you to take a look at these two concepts. I think it's perfectly legitimate to look about classifications of use. So if you do have a residential component, and which is great, they are frequently dealt with in a different kind of a rate structure. So that isn't something out of the ordinary, and sometimes it's a flat fee. We've done this with hotels where it's $200 per unit per night, like room night. So there's lots of different ways of approaching this. I think that I would recommend that it's going to be, that it's really only valuable to look at the very higher end nonprofits in the discussion of both their fee, as well as if there is a need, or if there are things that they could offer that would help offset some of the costs, that we have those individual conversations, but not for every single nonprofit, because the smaller ones are going to be so incremental. It's not going to have a huge impact on the bottom line of this budget. I'd like to think that we should set that upper limit as the ones that we would try to work with as a recommendation. And then I would like, if anybody wants to have an individual conversation with me, I found that those have been very helpful and productive, trying to get to, you know, what seems to make sense. And then look at it relative to the budget and say, you know, I think we've created a budget that addresses your priorities and is sort of a must-have as you have identified, and then there grow from the or look at, you know, how do you continue to refine that, you know, from so you have a revenue side and you have an expense side. So we're kind of coming at it from both angles.
So next Thursday, does that give
So
enough?
I would like to get the working group and anybody else who feels that they really
Yeah,
want
so
to be on
let's-
that
let's-
group.
Let's do, and if I could do this, because it's really kind of meshed into working group, non-working group, and quite honestly, it seems to be the same people that are joining. And I think, I know in one email I said, let's just deal with this as a group because it really is the
Okay.
same group. And so let's just call this as the working group task force, because otherwise it's just becoming muddled and I don't have
Well,
time to be.
some of us get lost, you know,
Yeah,
'cause-
I-
right, so I don't
Okay,
mind,
that's fine.
yeah.
That's fine. If that's how you want to approach it. I mean, you can approach it however you want, whatever makes sense for you as a group.
That's how I've
Um,
been doing it. So just so you're not using words that are not what this is a working group with the property owners. I put in the chat, and I wasn't sure whether it was, Tome or Valerie, but, the owners of Cabo Beacon who own property in the downtown and just wanted to welcome while he was here. So the conversation again is great. And, you know, so I will also email out the PowerPoint, take a look at that, really pick it apart and discuss it amongst, you know, pick up the phone to Anne. I just highly recommend that. And then, so we'll be on for next Thursday to come back. And I really want to be able to get some action items out of this, is that if you have questions in advance, if you have a question, that means somebody else will have that question. So ask the question and then we can have it be vetted out and on the table.
I would like, if people want to talk individually, please do. Jonathan, I had emailed you and we haven't been able to connect, but I would love to have anybody who wants to have an individual conversation to understand this better, or to look at the analysis that we've got, the spreadsheets. We can all look at the calculations and the analysis. Ultimately, my next steps with you, I would love to see you get to is if we can arrive at a consensus around what this fee structure should look like, and whether you can be supportive of that or not, and the budget. I've also sent out to you some frequently asked questions that I need some feedback. And you received them a couple of sessions ago. Maybe Mary, we can send those out again.
We will.
If you arrive at consensus and you agree that you want to move forward with this concept, what will be the next steps will be to create a sort of an executive summary piece. And in that piece, we'll have, here's our boundaries, here's our program of work, will be briefly described. Here are a series of frequently asked questions that when you go out and try to talk about this together, I can guarantee you're going to have these questions asked of you. So I've sent you a draft of what would be frequently asked questions that I think you're going to encounter. And if there are others, we can add to that. Remember, we're trying to be brief here. We're not producing War and Peace, but it's trifle. Wait a second. The fee structure, the budget, the boundaries, the plan, and the frequently asked questions. They'll come together in a trifold, a piece that you'll use to communicate to property owners what this is all about. We need to arrive at some consensus around this fee structure and budget, and review the frequently asked questions. That will be something we'll produce next.
So Anne, let me get to it, because I know Jonathan had some comments that wanted to when you first started. So Jonathan, your comments, please.
Sorry, I think I already made my comments.
No, I know. Well, you had unmuted yourself. It was started with Anne. It doesn't, at this point, if you're all set. before we talk about flyers or anything, we need to get past, the action item is simple. We need to get this group to look at the PowerPoint, make comments, have conversations with Anne, and then next Thursday to really, hopefully we come up with a solidified and a solidified front. Because I think if we don't get past that, I think that is just the test of where we go next.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a
the
simple
other
thing.
piece that is being worked on is concurrently is this this conversation with the city and what the city's agreement's going to look like and what the baseline services are. And John, I don't know if you want to make any comments around any of that or where that might be. I know Rob wasn't able to be here today.
Right, yes, and I was out yesterday, so as far as I am understanding, they're still in conversations. We met with the mayor a few days ago, who is going to hopefully put some pressure on some directors to get with these numbers, to make with the numbers, I should say, and we should have something soon. I don't have any real visibility on when that might be.
Does
That is ongoing work.
Yeah, so to that end, does the city's work, whatever that ultimately is decided to be, does that go, again, to my prior point, does that go towards the 760 or is that in addition to the 760?
The three things that we're trying to do with the city right now is to talk about what the baseline services are. And so those baselines, and to articulate what those are. Those are what that will be in place that you should expect to receive as part of what you pay for in your taxes. The second piece of this is how the city will participate as part of the bid, as a property owner within this bid, and what they can bring to the table. And we're hoping this is a combination of a cash investment into the top line of this budget. And also perhaps, and we have shared with you the conversation that we're having right now with the city around what additional things that they will bring to the table that has been factored in some part into this budget right now. And that you've seen that slideshow several times. We've kind of presented it every time we've met. And that's sort of a work in progress that Rob and the mayor and the city departments are looking at. So I don't think it really reduces the scope much, but it might be because we're kind of anticipating, because we've had some in the earlier conversations, they've identified some things. So those things have been somewhat factored into the budget as we've produced it so far.
John, I think the answer is a hard no to your question. That's pretty much the answer. Once the budget's in place, the answer is no. I get what you're saying. And, should it technically reduce, the investment for profits? Yes. Is that going to happen? No. That's what I'm getting here. So I think the answer is no. We're just kind of going in circles. I think the answer is no.
And I was ready to say, Joffrey, because Jonathan's questions was pretty, there about what he was asking. Does it affect or not? And so
Yeah, I don't want to turn this into a negative conversation. I'm just trying to understand.
No, you're not. It's a good question. I think the answer is no.
If I may. So, but it sounds like, at least with the city's contribution, the 760 was calculated after factoring in what the city is contributing. So it's not really a yes or a no, but we now understand that the 760 number doesn't change with the city's contribution. That was already factored into it. But I think the other than profits, those have not been factored into the 760 yet. In other words, the 760 wasn't the leftover after they make their in-kind or other contributions. So I would expect the other uses except for the city should reduce the 760, because I don't think their contributions were factored into that expense line. Is that a fair statement?
Well, into the expense line
in other words, the 760
I'm just trying.
what services we need above the city's contribution. Okay. But it wasn't above like nonprofit X provides somebody to clean the trash 3 days a week, reducing the trash removal contract. Therefore, I would assume that would reduce the 760 because it hadn't been previously factored in that they were having a person do that.
Yes, that you're right. That had that, and I think there may be, I don't think there's going to be a huge swing, but I think that may have, some incremental impact on the budget.
Well, I know you say there's not a huge swing, but
Well,
considering.
I'm just saying
But if
that
I may, I would anticipate someone, again, using the examples that John presented on the screen, the in-kind services of the largest property owner in the city should at least come close to the example used of the largest or one of the largest for-profit parcels, which I think was paying $12,000 a year. So I don't think it's an insignificant amount that these larger other than profits would be contributing. And 5-10 of those, that equals, even if they were only doing half, that's 30 to 50,000 towards that 760. So that's not an insignificant amount. I'm not trifling over pennies
no,
here.
you're right, but I would, and taking a look at the composition of this district, I think you really are John, I think that it's really a handful, not 5 or 10. It's more like 2 or 3 or that fall into that larger category. Is that correct, John? I'm going from memory here, but in the top 13 property owners, that I don't think that's it. But it's a good point, and we can drill down on that a bit further. I think conceptually, I would love to get you all to look closely at, we talked about 2 different scenarios. We talked about one that is that graduated fee structure based just on a straight calculation, and the other is looking at $100 a unit a year for the residential, and then a graduated fee structure. And my recommendation is you consider the latter, but you need to, it brings that yield down a bit, but it still is in the ballpark of where I think we would like to end up. And there may be, if there's a $30,000 or $50,000 swing, I'm not really sure what that looks like yet, because I haven't really we haven't had those individual conversations. It may impact that a bit, but I think and if you look at the overall budget and you look at the overall structure, are we getting there? I mean, I need you to, to say, or if we're not getting there, what suggestions might you have? We've had a very productive meetings with several of you that has helped, kind of get us to this point. And if you have other suggestions that we could consider, I'm more than happy to do that. I think we're trying to work our way. And then I ask you to back up and take a 30,000 foot view of the world and say, if you were the smallest property owner, does this work for you? If you are, whatever type of property owner, I realize this is an investment for everyone. And so how do you get there that you feel that it is reasonable?
And if I may, we have the ability as the arbiters of this fee structure to change it however we want. That was only an option that I produced that they could have. We don't necessarily have to take that option. We could cap it at 25% of your obligation. We could do anything we want.
But I think I'd like to have it, rather than, I'd like to have genuine feedback around the 2 options that we have on the table. And then if there is if you have a suggestion of another way to approach it, looking at the whole, we can continue to massage that. But I want to try to get, what we have been trying to do is to get at some of the suggestions that people have made around an upper limit, how to deal with residential and maybe a different way to look at it. How do we approach this construct of this fee structure overall? So if you have other ways of approaching it, and I think that, knowing what I know about every fee structure that's out there, these are also very reasonable ways to approach it and have been done elsewhere, so that that it's not unusual to make that sort of differential consideration for for residential, for nonprofits, for publicly owned properties, for commercially or mixed use properties. And in most cases, in mixed use properties, they have that differential. For if it's residential for a component of the building and commercial for another, there's typically a split differential for that. So we've looked at those kinds of things to consider. And it's not unusual. Many bids approach it that way. So I would love your input, because that's what's gonna, John and I can work on a million different scenarios. And if we just have, no, this doesn't work as the answer, we need to know, okay, what does work for you? Is there a way to approach this in the whole that is fair and reasonable for all property owners? How do we approach this? And I'd love your ideas, and you're all welcome to share those ideas with me. If you feel more comfortable having the individual conversation, happy to do that. I want to go back and press upon the fact that this overall budget is purchasing these supplemental programs and services that you have identified as priorities, and that's how we've constructed this going forward.
Great.
Cindy,
We're
Ted?
coming up to an hour's time, and I know that I'm gonna be losing a few folks because of some commitments they have, but so strategy is this, if anybody, first of all, everybody's gonna get a chance to take a look at that PowerPoint. You all have Ann's phone number, questions, formulate those questions. I'll also be sending out the frequently asked questions out to you for your review. We'll take that up next week. And again, if there's any other questions along the way, if you're thinking about it, somebody else is going to ask it. And I think to move us forward is really going to be important. And then, John, if you could just confirm, particularly if with Rob, I think it's important that we do get a sense of the city's commitment for next Thursday. While it doesn't make a difference, but yet it does, it's in part of the conversation. And I think that can bring value in terms of if a property owner, nonprofit and for-profit, are putting dollars on the table, what, again, with the large amount of city-owned property, what they're going to do. And I know Mike Lambert and I had a great conversation too, and his perspective, and I'll reach out to Mike to see if he can attend. I think we've got to get us to a little bit further down the line. So next Thursday, 8 a.m., everybody, did that work for everybody's schedule? Terrific. Great. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Ann, and thanks, John, for your hard work. And more importantly, the conversations and questions that have come from the property owners here. And have a great day.
Thank you.